Welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally, everyone. If you missed our last episode, we spoke about the importance of building a network of support and attending relevant professional development as educators with a focus on Main Street PD. If you missed the conversation, go back, check it out on your favorite audio platform or by visiting our YouTube channel. Please like it, share it, and review it. We are thrilled to welcome two incredible innovators who are transforming the way students learn coding and music. Dr. Brian Magerko is a professor of digital media at Georgia Tech, where he leads groundbreaking research at the intersection of artificial intelligence, creativity, and education. With over 100 peer-reviewed publications and numerous exhibitions worldwide, his work focuses on creating new human-computer creative experiences, including co-founding the music-based coding platform EarSketch. Joining him is Jason Freeman, a celebrated composer and music professor who believes everyone has a unique musical voice worth sharing. Sound like someone we know, Pete? Through this interactive compositions and educational innovations, Jason has redefined how music connects people. Together with Dr. Magerko, he co-created EarSketch, a free web-based program that teaches students to code in Python and JavaScript. Okay, Fred, help us with that. Through the power of music composition and remixing. Their work has inspired over 1 million students worldwide, showing that creativity, technology, and education can come together in amazing ways. Please welcome to the Teacher's Pep Rally, Brian and Jason.
Hey,
welcome. Yay, welcome, guys. We're so happy that you're here. And, you know, in case our friends out there forgot, Pete and I are in Georgia, so Georgia Tech is in the house, and that's very exciting. Sorry, Bulldogs. Go Jackets.
Here we go.
Those are fighting words. So I have a question for you two as we kind of get started. And Jason, maybe I'll ask you first. How did you get into the realm of education?
So it was a really gradual thing for me. I think that as a teenager, I actually started teaching in summer programs and things while I was in high school and got a little bit of the teaching bug. But then decided that really the career I wanted to pursue was as a software engineer. And so I majored in computer science in college before coming to my senses and changing my major to music about halfway through. I was always kind of looking for ways to bring that together. But, you know, pretty clearly, eventually, kind of academia seemed to be a really good career path for me as a way that I could pursue the things I really wanted to do creatively, while also kind of, you know, fulfilling my passion for being an educator. And it's been a great career for me. In terms of the work we do, though, I used to always be focused on writing music, usually for professional musicians. And it was really about 15, 16, 17 years ago where we started doing works that felt less like musical performances and compositions and more like platforms that people could use for different things. And increasingly started to use these platforms in educational settings, in summer camps, in after-school programs, in artist residencies, things like that. But EarSketch, when Brian and I met each other and started coming up with a new idea, this was really the first time that I was doing something in my research that was about education from the ground up, rather than starting with a creative idea and then figuring out how it might have an impact in the education space.
That's amazing. And I love, as I was reading the introduction, I could envision the connections that you two must have found and the inspiration that you get from each other, and probably the challenges that you make, as you both kind of continue to grow and find new ways for EarSketch to reach more students. So Brian, how about you? How did you end up in the education profession?
Well, when I was a kid and my folks would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, the answer was either a scientist or a comedian. And I thought if I were to do both of them, one would be easier to have as the primary than the other. My goal wasn't to be a teacher or to do research on education necessarily. But in college, I needed to pay my rent and got a job teaching the required computer literacy course that was at my university in the mid 90s. It was very interesting. Like literally, you would have people who didn't know, who thought the mouse went on the screen and stuff. It was really a transitional time for people to use computing technology to the extent that they needed to graduate from the school. So that was a really neat experience teaching folks that. And I wound up being involved in education research and involving AI at Carnegie Mellon in the late 90s with this superstar named Ken Kettinger, who's one of the sort of leaders in the space. So yeah, Mr. Fred, you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I was a terrible undergraduate programmer for Ken for 2 years. But that experience of working with him in intelligent tutoring systems, which is sort of his main thing, was really seminal for me thinking about how digital media can be adapted and personalized to people, and specifically for pedagogical reasons. That little job that I had with him wound up highly influencing my career, both in terms of like early research that I did with military training and adapting stories to help pedagogical effectiveness through storytelling, all the way to working on EarSketch, which was easily I think it both is and will be the most used educational, like, anything I'll ever make. So
that's
be involved in
amazing. Yes, it's amazing. And I think to a certain degree, teaching is a science. So you did get into the sciences, I think, Brian, or at least that's my opinion. So I tell you what, Brian, do you think that I want to talk a little bit about EarSketch. We're going to get really into that. But before we do, let's just make sure everyone understands what that platform is, what's its purpose. And then if you'd like, maybe we could do a demo or two for our friends who are either watching live or go back and watch the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Well, Brian's pulling that up. Jason, you want to tell us a little bit more about this platform?
Sure. So Brian and I started working on EarSketch more years ago than I can remember. I think it was in the early 2010s. And the real idea was to do something that earlier even before that, Brian says, maybe 2008, 2009, we had this idea. Originally, we wanted to teach music theory to kids online. That was the original motivation. We came up with this idea that was awful, and it's probably good that we never built it. And then we pivoted and came up with I think a better idea, which is really to bring this idea of code-based composition, the idea that you write code to make music algorithmically rather than just writing the music note for note, which has been a common practice in academic and some other circles for decades. I mean, going back to the early days of computers, but to put this in an environment that would be really engaging to students who are learning about computer science for the first time. And so we created a platform that looks like any other music production software, GarageBand or Ableton Live or whatever else you might use to record and make music. But instead of dragging stuff around in the UI to make music, you write code in Python or JavaScript to do everything. And then there's a sound library also that you can draw from. So the key thing here was that we really wanted kids to be able to make music that they liked, that they wanted to share with other people in a matter of an hour, to really hook them and get them to understand that computing was something that could be personal and expressive and relevant to them in their lives. And so the whole design of the platform is really, really focused on that idea. How can we hook students, even if they've never played an instrument, they don't read music notation, never written a line of code, how can we get them over that initial hump to be doing something really exciting that they're proud of, that they like, and they want to share with others?
That's amazing.
So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, I'm going to bring it into the stage now so everybody can see it. So if you're listening to the podcast, you can come back into the video and you'll be able to see this, but this is going to be a good view of what this looks like.
Okay, I can walk us through this really quickly. We've got an example from an early contest winner, I think in 2019, which is one of my favorite EarSketch projects. Even though it's quite simple computationally, it's a really good example of kind of the personal motivation that students have behind some of the projects that they make. You can see over here, we've got a large collection of sounds, over almost 5,000 that have been made by folks in the music industry, like Common, Sierra, Alicia Keys, Pharrell. There's also Magerko songs, samples. We've got this really useful view for your audio project, which looks really similar to what you would see in GarageBand and Ableton Live, and like Jason was mentioning earlier. So it's a really common and like understandable metaphor for looking at music across time and tracks. And here, this is a very common sort of representation, a way to interact with and write code. So this is taking like pretty like useful metaphors that apply to real world applications, and provide kids sort of an authentic look into both music production and programming through their projects. And over on the right here, we have a curriculum, and on another site, there's a teachers facing material with quizzes and project plans and whatnot. Let's see if the audio works here, just to give you guys, this is the first and only computational gospel song that I've ever heard. So I'll just play a little bit of it for you. Tell me if it's not playing. Okay. Oh, wait. Well, I stopped the share, but I was trying to stop playing. Anyway, but you can kind of get like how there was a student who sat here and found some samples of like, that is what I want to do. And that opening that door for students who might not be considering computing, but see themselves in this somewhere, whether it's because they're interested in music or music production, or they simply really like the open-ended nature of expressing themselves through programming instead of being told to sort numbers a certain way. Like you can see that effect really evident in this kid who made a gospel project for their programming class, you know?
That's really cool. Yeah, it's that creativity that we all strive to see. Like we all know that, well, you and I probably really know, and Jason, coding is creative, right? It's an expressive way to express yourself. Except we don't always teach it that way. You know, it's very much rudimentary, fundamental type stuff.
That's not how I learned. I sorted the heck out of things.
Oh,
lots
right.
Lots of
Bubble sort, linked list, you know, the whole thing. That everything was trite. Everything didn't have a connection to the real world that we were learning in academia in the 90s.
It's more than that. I think that's one side of it. But the other side is that coding isn't always about finding the single correct solution to a problem.
Correct.
Right. It's not about necessarily you run the code and either generates the right answer or the wrong answer. And something that I love about creative coding and EarSketch and lots of other platforms that focus on creative coding is that there's no right answer, right? You know, you're not like, well, that music is not the music that you were supposed to write. You know, you weren't supposed to use gospel, or you weren't supposed to combine these things in that way. So students are going where they want to creatively. They're using their intuition to figure out what makes sense for them musically, and then figuring out how to accomplish those goals through the code that they're writing. And that's a constant back and forth that they're going through as they work on the project.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because a lot of the things we're gearing up, especially today in the classroom, we're seeing them, you know, get a business problem, and you have to make sure you meet the goals and the requirements of that particular case. And it has to meet that, right? That's what it has to be. There's not a lot of deviation, where this does allow for that creative wondering, if you want to call it that. Yeah, that's a really, really cool way to look at it.
I like the components too that you were talking about, Brian, where, you know, you support also the teachers, because I'm thinking about a lot of our friends out there that are listening. So if they wanted to try to use this, especially for any students where they see the potential of them, you know, being creative, but through this kind of way, you all are supporting them and how they can help their classroom or their student be able to do that. So that's so cool. One of the things that struck me, because I read an article about you guys in an ed tech magazine, and I was like, oh my gosh, we have to have them come on to the Teachers Pep Rally. And it talked about how your vision kind of evolved to expand accessibility, primarily for the blind and visually impaired youth. Can you tell us a little bit about like how that kind of started to happen, and then what are some things that you would like to see that EarSketch does to help our inclusivity, you know, for all students to be able to use this?
I can maybe answer the first part, and Jason can do the second. But I mean, in short, it felt early on like we would be on the road showing off EarSketch, like at CS education conferences or at an NSF gathering or something. And at least once a year, somebody would ask us, "Hey, gonna make this for accessible for blind people?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." When we have the time and money to focus on that, then, but like right now, we're just trying to get this whole thing built, you know. And it just kept coming up. It kept coming up, and we, you know, were able to come to a steady state in terms of the software architecture, in terms of what we're teaching, and we were able to focus writing proposals, like specifically to get this work funded. And we were pretty fortunate to get the funding to do this. So it was very much a long time in the making. And the rationale behind like why focus in that direction with EarSketch is like, if you're blind or visually impaired and you want to get into computer science, all of the cool stuff that is there to engage you is visual, like robotics,
yep.
Like, you know, animation, video games, like it all is heavily visual. And some of these kids just smush their faces against the screen, but for many it's just simply like there's just not a lot of option, and they're cut off from all of this expressive computing that's accessible to the rest of us. So EarSketch just seems to be that one particular avenue, or music more broadly, where like, hey, maybe this is a really fruitful platform for engaging kids focusing on hearing. Let's see how far we can get, you know, even with like completely blind students. If we can design towards that population, then we're going to capture a lot of people that literally have nothing else that they're looking at. So it's sort of that, like we're not doing it for deaf people, right? You know, and simply because this isn't the right medium for that. It's the opposite here for blind visually impaired folks.
Wow.
I just want to add on a couple thoughts to this, because kind of with the hindsight that we have now, I think we made a couple kind of big mistakes or misconceptions along the way that are worth highlighting. The first one is that we should build the platform first and then focus on accessibility later. And we realize now that was stupid, right? To do this properly, we really should have been working on thinking about accessibility and universal design from the very beginning of conceiving the platform. But at the time we were building the platform, we thought it was going to be for one summer camp, one class. We were piloting things little by little. We had no idea it was going to grow in the way it did. And so it kind of, became something that we became aware of much later in the development history of EarSketch. And so now we're trying to go back and approach this from the perspective of, well, not only like are there things that we need to do to make this more accessible to students who are blind or visually impaired, but can we approach this from a perspective that's actually making a platform better for everybody, where we're learning some design aspects that that benefit everybody, and we're learning that just through studying particular what's needed for one population of students. The second thing, and maybe Brian knew this all along, but I certainly didn't, was what people have been asking us about was really like screen reader compatibility. And so we initially got a small grant with the generosity of Microsoft to be able to work with these experts on our campus at Georgia Tech at the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. And they went through and they did a whole audit of the entire EarSketch website, and they sent us a giant document about all the problems we had with screen reader compatibility and also with screen magnifiers. And we're like, you got to fix all these things. And we got a wonderful graduate student who went through that whole list and fixed them all. We're like, okay, that's great. And we went back to the Center for Inclusive Design and Innovation. We said, okay, now can you try this out with some people who, who are blind or visually impaired, and let us know how it goes? Because we did what you asked us to do. I'm oversimplifying here a little bit, but
but anybody that's listening to this, if they don't have a tech background and they didn't have to work that list, the list can be incredibly daunting. It's an intimidating workload to do. It's an important workload, but it's a big one. It is big.
It's daunting and it's important, but it's like the first 1% of the work, because what that means is that we're kind of following the letter of the guidelines for compatibility with assistive technologies. And that, just because it works with it doesn't mean that it works well with those technologies, or that it's easy for students who are themselves often in the process of learning to use those assistive technologies themselves to then also learn how to use EarSketch on top of that and do all those things together. And so, so through some of the work we've been doing over the last year or two, which Brian can talk about a lot more if you all want, we've been really learning through working with students, working with teachers who are the experts in this space, what really happens and where the struggles really are, and then we're trying to design for that. It's not about meeting the kind of the bare minimum requirements, but really, finding something that's going to work in the learning context.
That's a if you don't mind me jumping in again, another question. That's a really fine needle to thread, though, right? As a let's not talk about it from a research standpoint, but from a startup standpoint, because the general thought process with a lot of things today is minimum viable product, MVP, and if you follow that development paradigm, you're throwing stuff out there. You want to get it, and it is accessibility. Unfortunately, is an afterthought, and what you're pointing out is important for anybody out there that's listening. You don't want to overthink it, but it might be a huge part of your demographic. And it might, if you're looking at it from a sales perspective or a reach perspective, you want to be inclusive and you want to take the time to do that. And there are ways to do it and to do it right. But you're right. On the other hand, it's often, it's kind of like putting comments in your code. You do it after the fact and so on.
Go ahead, Brian.
I think some of it's about pushing to consider design problems at a much finer grain. Like Jason, did you mention the underscores a minute ago? No. Yeah. So like we have, like I said, almost 5,000 samples like in our library. Each of them are named in their file names were named with the name of the producer or the artist, and then maybe the instrument name, and then like a number or something like that. And between them all are underscores. So when screen readers get to that kind of content, instead of Alicia Keys Piano 1, and then just being able to visually scroll down and go, oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 5 of these, you get Alicia underscore Keys underscore 1, Alicia underscore Keys underscore. It's not quite so authoritarian sounding, but still, we have found students out in the wild who are just dealing with it because, as some of our collaborators pointed out to us, they're all used to using horrible software all the time, which is really hard to hear, actually. But so they just kind of were dealing with it. Imagine what maybe the experience would be like if we worked with them and developed something intentionally for them. So, but by doing that, we're actually working on like considering different designs for how to represent and search and access the music library that other people are probably going to want to use too. Mm-hmm. So because we looked it down, like Jason was saying earlier, we like refined down to this really, really, really detailed question for the specific population. We might have found a much nicer solution that everybody's going to enjoy, that we would never have found otherwise.
Yeah.
And I like what Jason said about, that you're using the students and the teachers as a way to share with you their experience and almost like they're teaching you back about things that maybe you didn't even realize that this platform could be for people. So what are some ways that you've been kind of surprised of how people have been using this and you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing?
How people are using EarSketch now?
Yes. What are some ways that some of the students have been, that you've been hearing about how people are using it in their classrooms?
Jason, do you?
So I'll give one example just because it's very appropriate for this podcast.
Okay.
And it's happened multiple times where a class will actually create a song for their school that is then used at a school pep rally.
Cool. That's very cool. We like that, especially because
love those.
That's amazing. And do you incorporate AI? I talked about that a little bit in your introduction. Have you been able to incorporate AI yet in the platform? Or if not, how do you see that maybe being a component for it? Like, Let's learn out about that a little bit. Tell me something I may not understand about it.
Well, we actually were working on a collaborative. I mean, like I was inspired by the work I did with Ken Kenninger in the 90s. We were working on sort of an intelligent learning companion in EarSketch that could help guide you through technical problems and learning how to code, as well as more aesthetic questions about how to write music. So I think we were the first to develop an AI that could guide somebody pedagogically for both sides of that coin. We also did it. When did we start? 2018, I think it was.
Yep. And then we did our final studies. Started like a month after ChatGPT came out.
Oh, wow.
So we were developing on a different generation of AI technology, and by the time we did our studies in the classrooms, we were providing something more like Alexa, and they were expecting ChatGPT.
So it was like literally a language-based interface, and like there was a lot of interest. Oh, I can see how useful this is, and then suddenly everybody was like, "Why can't it talk to me about recipes?"
That's where we are.
Right. Well, that's where we're at currently. We have a few folks who are looking at designing a AI assistive agent, particularly again for this BVI population that we're working with, but with a distinct eye towards it being useful for everybody. Along with it will have to come a teacher kind of interface and tool, because some teachers won't want AI at all in their classroom. Some students or teachers will see the benefit. Some teachers will want some of the benefit, but they want some to be so just giving sort of teacher agency over how the tool is integrated into the classroom is sort of a key point for that. As well as, and I have to point this out, using large language models for this, they're terrible, right? Like, they're not perfect by any means. They will give you wrong code sometimes. They'll maybe make up something. Like, we're going to do our best to mitigate those issues, but still, the idea of coding with an AI is itself, in and of itself, a literacy. So part of the work that we're trying to do is build this boundary object, not only that can help you like with your project, but also at a meta level, have content about, hey, here's how you use this thing effectively and ethically. So if somebody tries to copy and paste the code into their project, it says, hey, don't copy people's code like this unless you're gonna whatever. Like, are you sure this is okay with your teacher? Like, we haven't designed it yet, obviously, but regardless, even those kinds of options are probably going to be at that teacher level control, and it's going to be about us providing a palette instead.
If I can, I just want to add on a couple other thoughts here. First, just so you all know, we didn't waste 5 years of our lives building this AI model that no one wanted to use. We learned a ton through that process about what they can be useful for. We studied how students actually collaborate with each other through dialogue, and what they want to get from an AI agent. And all those findings have been fascinating and really, really helpful in the work that we're doing now. But the other kind of, piggybacking on what Brian just said, the other thing that I think has been really interesting is that a couple of organizations that use EarSketch on their own have already been experimenting with bringing AI into the platform in some way in the teaching they're doing. And a lot of what they've been doing is kind of the lowest hanging fruit is getting people through writing prompts to get EarSketch code to come out, and then assuming that code doesn't work, and challenging the students to debug that code and actually get it to do what they thought it was going to do in the first place. And that's interesting from two perspectives. It gives there's an AI literacy component to this, right? So being aware of what comes out of a large language model and realizing that it makes mistakes and it's not perfect, but also from the perspective that students can sometimes struggle to generate code from scratch, but it might take a lower cognitive load for them to debug code that's already in front of them, and kind of parse that and rework it. And so it might enable students to actually work with more complicated concepts than they're able to do just with a blank screen in front of them, and jumpstart their learning in that way.
Like, or going from pseudo, or like, here's all the pseudo code, you fill it in, or what, right? Like, that's part of the research, is figuring out sort of what are the right scaffolds that teachers are going to want with the teachers.
Yeah, I think that's how we want all of educators or people in the learning environment to model, and that is it's okay to take risks. You can't start it perfect. You've got to, that's part of the learning process. So everything I'm hearing you guys say, I'm like, this is so cool. I hear that it's taken a lot of hard work, probably a lot of rethinking, going back to the, proverbial whiteboard and re-strategizing and stuff. But for me, I think that it's exciting that you two are so passionate about this, and that you already are making an impact, not just to our friends who are blind or visually impaired, but also just to classrooms, to just give them a tool and be like, let's see what you can do with it, instead of it being so full of those bumpers like in bowling, telling people exactly what they need to be doing. So my question to you both then is, if we think kind of about the future, where do you hope EarSketch, or maybe even more broadly, accessible coding education will be in a couple years from now, with AI, with things like EarSketch, with all these things? Where would you love to see it go?
Incredibly well funded by the federal government.
Okay, nice.
I think there's a big question about kind of what coding students will need to know and in what ways. And I think we often see in computer science education that coding is made equivalent to computer science. And so if you can write a few function calls, get something to move around on the screen, or get a few sounds in your sketch, that's computer science. And counter to that has been this idea of computational thinking for a really long time, which I love, which is really about the thought processes and the logic behind how computers work, and really challenging students to get into that, and that is not the same thing as coding.
No.
And I think as we move forward, with EarSketch and with computing education more generally, for any audience, we really, I hope that we get to a point where we really have an understanding of how we can prioritize this development of computational thinking. Because even if we increasingly start to rely on large language models to do some of the coding for us, that skill of computational thinking is still going to be critical. And so I hope in 5 years or whatever, we really are in a position where some students aren't even learning to code necessarily in the way that we think about it today, but they're really getting strong skills in computational thinking.
I like that a lot. I think that makes sense from where I stand on so many levels, with working with young people and then in the college level. And the other aspect I would say that I would love to see woven in there is more ethics. Ethics is always something we dance around in computer science. Going back to the 80s and the 90s, we understood it, but it wasn't. We were so narrow in our look at the computational side that we didn't look at some of the broader issues that also surround it, which is the importance of a liberal arts education too. However, you're delivering your main core degree. But I like what you said though, in terms of the thinking aspect, and I love the tool because I think it's something that it's a gateway. In my opinion, like it looks like when you expose this kind of tool to a young person that's not interested in coding or anything like that, it starts to allow them to see that bridge into computational sciences or anything like that, because that is where the skill sets may ultimately be resting and needing in the future, is the ability to think critically, solve problems, and hopefully within ethical guidelines. And just to back up a little bit, I shared this with my class just the other day. And are you both aware of Cluely? Have you seen what Cluely has done?
Don't have
Check it out. It made a big splash, but basically they were tearing down the barrier of what's wrong with cheating. Everyone should cheat. So my students were looking at it from the standpoint of coding, because the tool was created in order for two Columbia students to take the coding test for Amazon, Facebook, Twitter, or X, to kind of do their test. But they saw the answers on the screen that was undetectable during the lockdown session of the test. And so there's this ethical piece to all of this AI coming in, but I would love to see younger people become more aware of what is right and wrong to be doing with this, but it gets really hard to define also what is right and wrong.
So I think this is a place where music can be a really important teaching tool as well, because students really, it's in our consciousness right now. It's in our popular culture that AI is being used to generate the voices and likenesses of famous artists that students listen to every day, and those kinds of debates are things that they're keenly aware of. And so I think we have an opportunity, just like with EarSketch more broadly, the music is this hook to get them engaged in computer science. I think it's also a really interesting hook through music to start having these conversations about ethics in AI.
Yeah, nice.
Jason, I couldn't agree anymore. Like in my classroom, the kids will say, "What does this have to do with history? What does this have to do with math? Why are you da, da, da?" And I'm like, everything. This is the one subject that's the umbrella to everything else. You're welcome. So right now, I want to learn more about EarSketch because in my class right now, they're doing their end of the year big project. They make a fictional product. And then they have to do background music for an advertisement for that product. And they also have to make a jingle. And we're using Chrome Music Lab. We're using GarageBand. I'm so excited to learn more about EarSketch. Maybe next year, this is something that we'll be able to dive into. And then also, like you said, the school song, I love because some of my kids right now, we have our talent show coming up in a couple weeks, big end of the year event. And they're really into making up their own beats, making up their own compositions. I would love to dive into that and use this in the future. So I'm very excited about this. I also love how you guys mentioned at the beginning. I've been teaching 20 years. I've been in a lot of presentations, a lot of conferences, a lot of rolling my eyes. They say the same thing. I think you said something about this that I haven't heard anybody else say about a platform like this. You said personal, relevant, and experiential. And that's a home run to me. That really resonates with me. So thank you guys.
So I'm curious. We ask all our guests this. Brian, I'll ask you first. We'd like to hear stories about a teacher, a coach, or a mentor that influenced or inspired or lifted up you. So do you have someone that you like to shout out and share with us?
Absolutely. That easily would have to be my kindergarten teacher, Miss Charlene Kress, from Tanglewood Elementary, outside of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. When my folks put me into that class a few weeks later, she grabbed my parents or my mother, and she's like, "Hey, you need to get that kid tested." She's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Well, this kid's really smart." They're like, "What?" Like, no, this kid's really smart. You gotta do something about this. And so they went and got me tested, and then suddenly I was in a gifted class every week with fifth graders and stuff. So like that was such a pivotal, huge moment. Like I've talked to her on the phone every once in a blue moon for like, I think I talked to her a couple of years ago.
Wow.
So she's just somebody that I owe just an enormous amount of gratitude for picking me out of a haystack and fostering an early start.
That's great. Thank you. How about you, Jason?
So I was really struggling to settle on just one, but I think
Okay. You can give
especially
us more than one.
no, I think Aaron, since given your disciplinary focus, I think the first name that jumped to my mind was my 11th grade English teacher, Kevin Call. And I think that, even as I think through college and graduate school, he was really the first person that challenged me to write well and persuasively in an organized and logical way and defend the approach that I was taking. I still remember struggling to write an essay about Hamlet, which is like the perfect junior year cliche. But the lessons about how to write effectively are ones that I took with me through college and through my life. And I often tell people, I think I'm okay at a lot of things, but I think I'm a pretty good writer. And that has helped me so much in my career, in ways that, that no other skill has kind of opened doors for me the way that being able to write well has.
Oh, that makes my ELA heart so happy. And that you brought in Hamlet, which is one of my all-time favorites. So thank you. Thank you, both of you, for
Me
sharing
tonight.
that story.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So how can people, if they're interested in this platform we're talking about, how can they find it? And is there a cost or anything that they should be aware of?
So thanks to funding we've had over the years, especially from the National Science Foundation, EarSketch is online, web-based, and free. runs on Windows, Mac, Chromebook, and you just go to earsketch.gatech.edu, and everything you need is right there.
Wonderful. And when we push this out, I mean, on the video, Fred has got it on there, but also if you're listening just to the audio version of it, we'll make sure to put that link in our show notes. Pete, how about other people who want to continue this conversation with us?
Yeah, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening to us, please like, subscribe, follow, leave us a review, leave a comment, keep the conversation going. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and our website is teacherpeprally.com.
Thank you. And Brian, Jason, thank you so much for your time. I cannot wait to see what you continue to do. I'm sure the next EdTech magazine will have you in there again. I look forward to it. And if I ever see you around Atlanta, I'll make sure to personally say hello.
Oh, please do.
All right.
Hey, thanks
so much
guys. It
for
was
having
great
us.
talking to you tonight.
Thank you.